Hello, it's Jeselle again, and welcome to today's edition of Motivational Minds Radio. This is the program where we get to take a closer look into the mind of the authors who put the magic on the page into the books that we read to keep our pleasure up, to keep us inspired, keep us motivated, and get us prepared for the adventures that life throws at us on a daily basis. Today, we have got author with us, Dr. Wally Hauck. And Dr. Wally Hauck is the author of Stop The Leadership Malpractice, How to Replace the Typical Performance Appraisal. Now, typically we all think, I think of appraisals when it comes to real estate, but what he has now turned appraisals into is in the performance analysis of jobs and how they evaluate the performance of their employees. So Dr. Wally Hauck, he has a cure for this deadly disease known as typical performance appraisal. He holds a doctorate in organizational leadership from Warren National University, a Master of Business Administration in Finance from Iona College. Very interesting. I live 3 blocks away from Iona College. And a bachelor's degree in philosophy from the University of Pennsylvania. He is a certified speaking professional, or CSP, also known as, and he is also a certified speaking professional designation established in 1980. Now, this establishment has been the speaking industry's international measure of professional platform skill. Now, if I went through everything that Dr. Wally Hauck has to bring to the table here, we would not get a chance to speak to him. And like all of our authors, they have such amazing backgrounds, but this is really important and crucial information when it comes to changing the way organizations run. So let's just get straight to it. Dr. Wally Hauck, welcome to the show. How are you?
Jeselle, thanks so much. When you're old like me, you have accomplished a lot. So that's part of the explanation about why that was such a long bio.
That's okay. Long bios are beautiful. It's just we want to get to the conversation, and we want to get to the good stuff. So not that that's not good. It's fantastic, but I am just so curious to know more about this book that you've written. Can you please, as I was talking about appraisals, can you please explain where the inspiration came from to get this book written and really deliver this information to the people?
Oh, my goodness. I really appreciate that question because the inspiration came from the pain that I felt when I went through appraisals myself, performance reviews or performance appraisal myself when I worked for a large organization. And I found them to be so incredibly not just challenging but damaging to the relationship that I had with my boss. He would, I mostly had men bosses, back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And I remember this one time when I had this performance review with this vice president, and actually the week before I was awarded a contract from a client that was one of the biggest contracts I had ever gotten and one of the biggest that the organization ever got. So I got a great performance review that week. But the following week, the client, for reasons beyond my control, canceled the contract. So then he called me in afterward, and he berated me and turned it into, a session where he was criticizing me. And I never, ever forgot that. That led me to study Dr. Deming. Deming was the gentleman that went to Japan and taught Toyota how to build a car. And we all know how Toyota is now number one in units and also revenue. In fact, their value, Toyota's value, is greater than the combination of all of the U.S. car companies combined. And so I studied Deming, and Deming said that the performance appraisal is a deadly disease, and it just resonated with me, and I've just kept with it, and I've studied it ever since. So it was that emotional damage that vice president gave me that motivated me really to end up finally writing the book.
Oh, that's a fantastic answer. I mean, emotional damage is where all great writing comes from, right?
Absolutely. It's got to be, right? That's how you get the motivation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So how do you feel that the relationship with your boss kind of changed your approach into how you dealt with future bosses and organizations?
Well, it changed my relationship because it damaged the trust that I had. So I found myself preventing sharing information that might be helpful to the organization because I did not want to be criticized for that information. And that's a pattern that we see in virtually all organizations that attempt to control people's behavior. I'll give you a quick story, if you don't mind.
Please share.
In 2003, the Columbia shuttle came back through the atmosphere and burned up in the atmosphere. We lost 9 astronauts, 9 heroes. And so for 9 months after that, the 17 rocket scientists got together and they studied what was the root cause. Well, the physical root cause was a little tiny piece of foam upon takeoff. A tiny piece of foam broke off from the fuel cell and hit the underside of the wing and damaged one of the heat tiles. It only cracked one of the heat tiles. And that crack was enough to let the hot air in when they came back through the atmosphere, and it blew up the ship. So that was the physical cause. But what they said was the real root cause was the culture of silence. Because of fear created by criticism, the engineers knew that there might be a problem with this, but they said nothing to the management because they were afraid that they were going to be criticized. They were afraid that their funding was going to be taken away. They were afraid they were going to be taken off the project, and that's what they uncovered. So now, when you withhold information, not every organization can kill its employees, but in this case it did, and that's one of the things that motivates me to want to write this book and also promote this book, because when employees are silent, things are happening in an organization that are damaging both the organization and the customers of that organization. And I just think I call it malpractice. It's malpractice.
It's malpractice. I love that you've taken kind of a medical healthcare approach to explaining the care, the inner working care of an organization. I think that that's brilliant. And that information about the culture of silence and just having that fear of speaking up within your organization, that's golden. Where do you think that managers, where do you think that they go wrong? What do you think happens that gives them a poor performance review?
Well, it's the way the policy is set up, and the policy is set up because of the way we've been taught to think about people and problems. So I don't fault the managers. I fault the theory that we've been taught, and the book talks a lot about that, and so does Deming, that you must have the right theory if you're going to get the right answers to problems. And so let me explain. The theory that we've been taught is very similar, if not exactly like, a fellow by the name of Frederick Taylor's scientific management. And this was born out of really the industrial age. The industrial age brought on people working together in one place doing simple tasks in a factory in order to build products that could be sold. And when you get a lot of people like that in one place doing the same thing over and over again, you get a lot of variation. So this guy, Frederick Taylor, came in and he said, hey, he said, I'm going to make you guys millions of dollars if you listen to me. I'm going to lay out exactly in small little increments exactly the tasks that employees should do. And then what I want you to do is I want you to hold them accountable to those tasks. And by either not paying them if they mess up or firing them if they mess up. And if they do a good job, fine, they get paid, but otherwise we've got to control their behavior. Now, that made a lot of sense in the late 1800s and early 1900s because most people were immigrants and they were looking for jobs. They didn't speak English and they were not educated. And the tasks that we had to perform were very simple tasks in a factory. It didn't require a lot of brain power. In fact, they used to call the employees hands because that's really all they needed. They didn't need their brains. They just needed to do this stuff with their hands. So Frederick Taylor's made a lot of money for a lot of people in the industrial age, but the problem is we don't have that kind of economy anymore. We need everybody to problem solve and to think critically about their work and to serve their customers in innovative problem-solving ways. So by evaluating or trying to control people, you're damaging the ability to actually critically think about your work because you're withholding either information or you're waiting until somebody tells you what to do, so they won't criticize you and they won't evaluate you and they won't take away your bonus. So the whole thing is backfired. It was great once before, but now it's backfiring on us, and so we've got to evolve. And so I don't fault the managers because we've all been taught this. In fact, they're still teaching this in school. This is how our schools are run. This is how our public schools are run. The administrators, somebody creates the curriculum. They tell the administrators, do this curriculum. The administrators tell the teachers to do the curriculum. And then the teachers attempt to hold the students accountable by teaching to tests that will then lead the school to either get funding or not get funding. It's all Frederick Taylor. It's all the trying to control behavior, and it's not working. We got to stop it.
So where do you think the shift is? Like, I think that your answer has completely, it's just a great segue into my next question is, what's the formula? What is it that managers and organizations need to follow in order to bring it up to the next level?
Yeah, the shift is kind of interesting because in short, the shift is to think in terms of systems and not think in terms of parts. To think in terms of creating a context of performance, not trying to control the individual parts for performance. So I'll give you an example.
Great. Can you please go a bit further with that?
Yeah, I got to give you an example because it confuses people when I say things like that because we're not really taught systems thinking. But I'll give you two examples. The first example is let's say you need a new car. So instead of going to a dealership, because it's kind of a hassle, sometimes you go to a dealership, right, to buy a car. There, you got to haggle. You got to, you think you may not be getting the right deal, and you got to be careful. And so you say, no, I'm going to build my own car. You know what? So I'm going to get. I know an engineer. He's going to help me put it together. He and she's going to put it together for me. So I'm going to buy the motor from Honda. I'm going to buy the chassis from GMC. I'm going to get the transmission from Toyota, and I'm going to put it in a warehouse. They're going to put it together for me. Now, would it run? No, it wouldn't run. Why? Now, you get the very best parts, but it's the interactions between the parts that's more important than the parts themselves. And what we do right now is we look at the parts and we evaluate the parts. We evaluate the individuals, when in fact what we should be doing is working on the interactions between the parts and all work together as a team to fix the interactions, improve the quality of the interactions. Let me give you one other example, if I might. Because
you may.
What I find really fascinating is that we can look to nature to tell us, in a lot of cases, what to do and what not to do.
I'm so glad that this interview is on radio and not television, because if people were watching us have this conversation, my head would just be nodding up and down and up and down. So just
That's
keep
good.
going. Fantastic.
That's good.
Talk about nature. Nature has all the answers. Go ahead.
I totally agree, and we tend to ignore it, and that's what we've done. And that's what's causing the malpractice. When you don't follow principles that are guiding principles in nature, you end up with problems. That's just the way it works.
The beauty about nature is that, there's just this divine order to it. It works on its own. The answers are right around the corner from the problem. And with organizations, with ourselves, with anything that we do, we tend to look too far for the answers. And it's just beautiful what you have created here. Continue.
Okay. Well, the metaphor that I really like is flocking birds, because I believe that organizations right now, the way they're set up because of Frederick Taylor and our way of thinking about fixing the parts, is we think of an organization either like a machine that the parts have to be fixed, or like a human body where the head is in charge of everything. The parts have no choice without the brain. And that's the way we look at organizations. The parts have no decision without the engine, or the parts have no decision and choice without the brain. But really what we need to move toward is what we see in nature, which is flocking birds, it's called a self-organizing system.
A self-organizing system.
Self-organizing system. That's what a flock of birds is, or a school of fish. And there's other examples too. So I believe that instead of trying to control, the pyramid, and that's the typical performance appraisal is consistent with the pyramid, with the senior leaders at the top controlling everything that comes below. That's a tool to control the people down below. But in a self-organizing system, there's no control. What there is a set of principles that the individuals follow, and they have a choice about how they follow those principles, but their behavior is always consistent with the principles. I'll give you an example. Well, let's talk about the flocking birds, because it's kind of fun to think about that, because we can look out the window, especially in the fall, and we can see birds flocking. Now, why do they do that? So this is the vision and mission and strategy of an organization. God or nature has said, listen, birds, you're going to flock. Here's why. It's going to help you find food, shelter, and protect you from predators. So that's why they flock. They have hardwired into their brains, this is a good reason to flock. But then how do they do that? Well, they do it, and this is where we could use the visual, because the visual really brings it home. In fact, you could look up on YouTube. People could look up on YouTube starlings that are flocking, and just do a Google search on YouTube with starlings that flock, because in England, literally hundreds and thousands of them get together at this time of year and move all together. And how do they do that? They follow these three rules. They fly at the same average distance, speed, and direction as their closest neighbors. And by doing that, they move all together like one unit. So there's no leader yelling out, okay, turn left, turn right, oh, stop, slow down, back up. Nobody's yelling anything, because all they're doing is following those rules. So why can't organizations operate the same way? Give people the context, give people the rules, and then turn them loose to be entrepreneurial, to deliver what their customers want. And so what I lay out in the book is that very option, where you lay out the rules, or I call them values, operational values. You explain them to people, and then you help each other to follow those values. And by doing so, you create what is close to a self-organizing system. And what that does is it not only increases engagement, but it increases your ability to serve your customers, makes your customers happier.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, it's a breath of fresh air to hear that, and to know that there are people people like yourself out are really going into the organizations to teach them these kinds of things, because it's what we need. It's what the world needs to make sure that we are all moving together in the right direction at the same speed and with the same distance. Perfect rules to follow. What would you do differently if you could go back to, let's say, your first, when you first shared about your appraisal with your boss that you didn't really get along too well with? What would you do differently if you were in his shoes?
Oh, in his shoes, yeah. Thank you. That's the replacement process. I call it the Complete Performance Improvement Process, CPIP. CPIP is a replacement. So here's how it might work. The first thing you do is you eliminate the grade. You don't evaluate the individual, because in this model it makes no sense to evaluate the individual. Now about their performance. Now you can give them feedback about their behavior. For example, so yeah, let me lay out the three rules. The rules are: always behave with integrity, always behave with respect, and always serve your customer. And so I have operational values, and if the listeners are interested, they'll see it in the book. But the operational values are integrity, respect, and customer focus. So by explaining those, and by having them be observable behaviors, then you can give feedback to each other about that. Because very often managers don't even understand when they are being disrespectful, and they don't even understand when they're breaking integrity. I'll give you an example. The AOL CEO rather, just a few weeks ago, I don't know if you saw this in the news, but he was having a web seminar, and he was talking about how they had to have layoffs because their business is down and their revenue is down, and so they're going to lay people off, and he was explaining why. He had 500 people in the room, and he had 1,000 people listening on the web. And one of his employees came in and started taking pictures of him and video of him in the interview. And he turned to the guy and he yelled at him and he said, you're fired. You should not be doing this right now. This is very emotional for me. You're fired. And he fired him in front of the 1,500 people right there. Now he honestly, I really didn't even know what he was doing. That's what he said the next day. He apologized and he hired the guy back because he said, I was so emotionally upset that I didn't know what I was doing at the time because it was so emotional for me. And that's what tends to happen with leaders, is they do things that are so stupid at the time that it creates all kinds of problems and waste later on for employees and disengagement, that they need to be aware of it. And the way the current system is set up, it's like the king has no clothes. The king has his new clothes on, but he's naked. And nobody's willing to tell him because they're afraid they're going to be criticized. So the first thing is you have these rules set up where anybody can give feedback to anybody about those rules, because then you have a self-organizing system. So that's the first thing that I would change. And so you can give feedback to them, but you don't have to say you're a jerk or you're stupid. You can say, you know what? Here are the rules. You broke the rules. I just wanted you to know you broke the rules yesterday when you fired that guy. Oh, you're right, I did. Oh, my gosh, you're right. I'm so sorry. I apologize. I broke the rules. Because we make mistakes. We're human. We're not infallible. Everybody makes mistakes.
Absolutely.
And when leaders do it, they create the most waste. So that's the first thing I would do. And so you eliminate the grade completely, and then you have a conversation about the quality of the interactions. You have a conversation about the quality of the interactions between the employee and the manager, and about the quality of the interactions between the employee and the system that the employee works in. And I've got some examples there too. I feel like I'm talking too much, so I want to give you an opportunity to ask a question.
This is what this platform is for, so that these readers can know what exactly is happening. Now, the thing is, we're going to keep it much shorter this time because we are running out of time, unfortunately, but we are going to go ahead and get some questions and keep going after the show. And, gosh, I can already tell that this is going to be another interview down the line because this is such valuable information, and I thank you for being with us. So, quickly, if you can just share the last two, not full stories, but the last two kind of takeaways that are part of that process.
Well, I'll just give you an example. The systems interactions are handoffs that employees need to get information. And if employees don't get the information they need, it impacts their performance. Yes. So in this process, if I need information to do my job, like I emailed stuff to you, right, ahead of this interview. If I didn't email that, that's a handoff. If I didn't email that to you, then your ability to do this interview would have been damaged. And it might have caused people to think, well, Jeselle, my gosh, she doesn't even know how to do an interview. But it was because of me not sending you the information ahead of time that was the real root cause. But it made you look bad. So managers need to figure out with the employee what is holding you back, what systems, interactions, or handoffs that are holding you back that would help you perform better.
Yes, absolutely. Dr. Wally Hauck, he is with us today talking about his book, Stop the Leadership Malpractice, How to Replace the Typical Performance Appraisal. I think he's done an amazing job today at just sharing all this valuable information. And if you can just go ahead and share how people can reach you, I feel like you should close the show. You've been amazing. Please tell the people.
Thank you. That's very nice, Jeselle. Thank you. Well, please reach me at wally@wallyhauck.com is my email. So that's WALLY at WALLYHAUCK.com. And the website is optimumleadership.com. And I'd be pleased to answer any other questions. And the book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble websites. Stop the Leadership Malpractice.
Wow. Dr. Wally Hauck, everybody, thanks for being with us today. And Dr. Wally, thanks for being with us as well. And I look forward to continuing this conversation after the show. Bye, guys.
Jeselle, thank you.
You're welcome.